Well, good morning, everybody. And once again, Pacific Gas and Electric has decided to make it more difficult and more pioneer-like for us. But thanks to our Sunburst engineers who were here early, we have power from generators, so that noise you hear outside, just don't hear it. All right? It's the only reason you can hear me. So, this is a gorgeous day. It's beautiful outside, and it's kind of nice to sit around in a dark room with everybody. I have the lights on in the back, so if PG&E turns the power back on and you have your eyes closed, just think of it as you're seeing the light, okay? Emily told me that this morning. Once again, let me welcome everyone here. I see a lot of faces I've not seen before. Some of you are here for the retreat, and we definitely welcome you here. I'm very happy to be here with my spiritual family. Excuse me, I was going to lose it there. So, it's a little emotional. I was supposed to be here during the Great Flood of 23. And my topic was harnessing the power of the mind. I wished I could have harnessed the power of the water here. It would have been great. But that's what we're going to talk about today. It's not the topic that's in your online. So I want to talk about, oh, by the way, I was going to leave the children, let the children leave for their service, but the children, including Heiko, left already. So if there's any other children, there is a child service, so I don't see any others. So, did I just call Heiko a child? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Although we're all children at heart. So let's talk semantics for a minute. I always like to look at the meanings of words, and when I think of harnessing, first of all, I think of horses, and putting a harness on a horse so you can lead that horse wherever you want to, and that horse becomes a tool, something you can work with. But when I was thinking about harnessing, I thought about the Colorado River and the Hoover Dam, where that water flows through those turbines, turning the turbines, and the turning of those turbines produces electricity. So you have, basically with harnessing, you take one energy and you change it into even a greater thing. So it becomes more than it actually was. Rivers don't create electricity by themselves. So that's how I look at the word harnessing. When we look at the word the mind, or our mind, it gets kind of confusing. How do we harness the power of the mind? And the question isn't really easily answered because no one agrees in science today where the mind is and what it is. So if you're a materialist in the scientific world and you don't see that there's any vital force or any divine spirit, you think that everything is matter. Only matter matters, okay? And so when they look at the mind, they look at it as being our physical brain. So if that's what you think today, you're going to get your mind twisted a little bit because I'm going to change that idea. If you're more vitalistic and you believe in spirit or you believe in divine intervention, or you're a neuroscientist who's a vitalist, you actually look at the mind and you go, well, it's not just the physical brain. It's got to be in other places. The mind is not a physical place, it's an energy. And so the brain we have is physical. It responds to our five senses. That's what it's supposed to do. But how we think and our thoughts are not there in our brain. Our brain is not the mind. So this might be confusing to some. Anybody confused yet? Okay. All right. I was when I first started to think about this. We've learned from our spiritual masters that we consist of not only one body, but three bodies. So I want to share a quote from you. From you? No, for you. Okay. And this comes from a very interesting chapter in Autobiography of a Yogi. And I would actually recommend that all of you that have that book go home and look at this chapter today. Yogananda's in a room. His guru has passed on. And suddenly a light appears in his room, and it's the resurrected body of his guru, Sri Yukteswar. And they have a conversation that I can imagine, because of the length of the chapter, went on for several hours or several minutes, but it's a long chapter. And there's a lot of information about the astral worlds and what we do there and why they exist. It's just my favorite part of autobiography. But here's what Sri Yukteswar said. You have read in the scriptures that God encased the human soul successfully in 3 bodies: the idea or causal body, the subtle astral body, and which is the seat of man's mental and emotional natures, and the gross physical body. On earth, a man is equipped with his physical senses. An astral body works with his consciousness and the feelings, and a body made of lifetrons. A causal bodied being remains in a blissful state or realm of ideas. And so we have 3 bodies, and it's always pictured when you see illustrations. Physical body on the outside, astral body is next, and causal body is in the center. So the physical body is made of matter. There's no question. We can slap ourselves. This is matter. Although, not to rock the boat too much, but the chair you're sitting on isn't really solid. Neither is your body. We are basically slowed down energy. As Einstein explained it, E equals mc squared, that matter is nothing more than slowed down energy. If we could see the matter, the energy involved, we would see that everything is energy, including us. Our physical body, our astral body, or subtle body as it's sometimes called, is made up of energy and light. This is where our chakras exist. So the causal body is synonymous with our true self, and it's connected to the minds and thoughts of our divine parents. Our karma is stored in our astral body and also somewhat in our causal body, because our causal body contains all of our desires we've had in our different lives. And so there are some connection between the chakras in the astral body and the causal body. All right, now that I've said that, what is the mind? It is the conscious connection between all 3 of these bodies. The physical body, while we're alive, the physical body, particularly the brain, is simply reacting to the input put in from our 5 senses, or 6 or 7 senses, whatever you've developed in your lifetime. The astral body is receiving energy and light from the divine source, and the causal body is receiving thoughts and ideas from our divine source. So where is our mind? It's everywhere and nowhere. Our mind is energy, and our mind exists even when we're separated from our physical body. So even after death, our mind still exists. We still have rational thought. We still can have emotions. I want to share a personal experience with you. And as I meditated about this, Spirit said I can't tell the whole story, but I'm going to tell you the part that goes along with what we're talking about today. This happened some years ago, and I was in deep meditation. And suddenly I found myself above my own body in my meditation room, looking down at myself and my wife in meditation. So I was in my astral body. And in a few moments, I found myself above the meditation room, above the roof of my house, looking around. And it was very strange. I'll tell you, I could see in all directions at once. It wasn't where I pointed my eyes. It was everywhere. And I found that if I thought about what's going on at the farm, because I was living off the farm at that time, I was at the farm instantly, and I could see in real time what was happening at the farm. When I said, what's happening at the ranch? Suddenly I was here and seeing what was going on in real time, here. And then in an instant, I found myself in a strange place that I hadn't been to before. And I was surrounded by people who I knew had already passed on. And I was communicating with them, not in words, but basically telepathically. We were communicating with each other. And I even had the opportunity, someone I never met in this life, I was able to go and touch them, hug them, and embrace them. And that's when I came back out of my meditation. My wife said, "Why are you crying?" And I was crying because I'd had such an amazing experience of being out of my body for that period of time. And what I learned from that, though, is the mind does not exist right here in the brain. You can be detached from your physical body and still have rational thought and still have emotions. And our astral bodies are still capable of thinking and reasoning. So, now that you know that the mind exists nowhere and everywhere, and I've totally confused you, let's talk about how to harness the power of the mind. I think the topic really should have been, how do we synchronize our mind with the mind of our divine parents? Because the power of the Colorado River is what turns the turbines. It's the power of the thoughts of our divine parents that turn our own turbines of thinking and thought. Yogananda said this, and this is real important, because he said basically that there's a technique to approach that place where we can actually receive information directly from our divine parents, and it's called meditation. Oh, what a surprise. We're talking about meditation again. Well, let me share what Yogananda said, and I found this quote very interesting. I'd never read it before. People who do not read or meditate, who live only externally, do not develop any deep understanding. Meditation keeps you directly in tune with the power that evokes all thought. Wow, so all thought does not come from here. All thought comes from our divine parents. To touch that supreme power is in meditation. As a human being, you do injustice to yourself if you don't read, but to meditate is still better than reading. If you meditate, you'll find much more happiness than you've ever known. All knowledge will be given to you from within. My life has been that way. So this is Yogananda speaking. I have not read 20 books since I came to America 20 years ago, and I'm not proud of that fact. So this is around 1940, he's saying that. When I look at a book, I see whatever truth is contained in it, and it's already been given to me from God. All thought and truth comes from Spirit. If you commune with Him, you receive His wisdom direct. So read good books rather than waste time on unproductive activities, but better still, meditate and anchor your mind on the ultimate truth and source of truth, which is God. So here's, how can I say this? Here's my hallucination of what actually is happening in meditation in our three bodies. So if we start with our physical body, well, we're sitting in a chair, we're sitting on the floor. We relax our physical body and muscles. We focus our closed eyes to a point out in front of us, creating a movie screen, as Brother Norm used to talk about, in behind our closed eyes. And so we're looking through this point out to here, behind those closed eyes, looking at that movie screen, and we start breathing. And as we draw up our breath, we imagine that we're drawing up our breath from below us, below the root chakra, and bringing it up. And then as we exhale, we imagine we're bringing down the prana and life force through our crown chakra at the top. So that's what happens in our physical body. What's happening in our astral body? Well, during that time that we're meditating, as we draw our breath up, actually what we're doing is we're tapping into the source of our divine feminine. And sorry, guys, you have a divine feminine, and women, you have a divine masculine, okay? We are binary, if that's the right word, and God is feminine and masculine. So in our astral body, we're uncoiling the divine feminine at the root chakra. It's referred to as the kundalini. And we draw up that prana, that life force, upward through our chakras. And then as we get to the top, to our crown chakra, we open that crown chakra up, and we draw the prana down through all those chakras. And that's called a circulation when we're doing meditation. That life force that we breathe in, and life force, we could call it light, because that's really what it is, a form of energy, let me use an example. We had cable when I lived in the other part of Santa Barbara County years ago. And we wanted an extra phone line put in. And they put in a carrier. It wasn't a wire, it was just a way that they could use a carrier wire that was already in the cable to bring our internet into the house when the cable itself was just for the TV. So basically what we're doing, our breath, every time we take a breath, it can be a carrier. It's carrying in life force. It's the very thing that keeps us alive. That life force that we breathe in through our astral spine is what animates all the cells of our body. So our astral body is sharing that light with our actual physical nervous system. That's why we're alive. When you separate the physical body and the astral body, what do we call that? We call it death, okay? It's a separation of those two bodies. Now, in our causal body, we're focusing on our third eye while we're in meditation. We're looking at the movie screen, and if we're very visual, we may see a golden ring surrounding a deep blue background. And that golden ring is not solid, it's moving, sort of like, I guess you'd call it flames almost. Now, when you're in your causal, can we call it causal consciousness? I'll call it, when we're in our causal body, we can actually see a tiny white star in the middle of that blue background. And it's been identified that that star is our true self. It is our connection to our divine parents. Every one of you in this room is connected right now to God. In fact, everyone in this room is connected to each other. It's all the same light. Yogananda made this statement about thoughts, creative arts, and scientific breakthroughs. He said, thoughts are universally, not individually rooted. A truth cannot be created. It can only be perceived. Well, that's a very strong statement, because what it says is basically thoughts don't originate in us. They flow through us. We tap into them, and we attract positive or negative thoughts depending on our level of consciousness in our life. I wanted to use an example, and one of the examples I thought of, I watched a special a few years ago on PBS. It was called Genius, and it was about Albert Einstein. And if you haven't seen it, it was on PBS, I think, or Discovery. It is absolutely awesome. Anyway, you may remember, if you're scientifically prone, that Einstein developed, first of all, the special theory of relativity, and then 10 years later, he developed the general theory of relativity, which actually brought gravity into the equation. How did he come to that? See, Einstein was not a mathematician. He wasn't very good at math. He actually hired people to do the math and the equations. Did he do experiments in his lab? No, he didn't do experiments. What did he do? He thought about things with his rational mind. It took him 10 years between one theory and the other to come in and figure out how gravity fit into the whole thing. And here's how it happened. He's standing on a bridge in Germany, watching a river flow, and a barge is moving down the river, and he sees that there's logs in the river, and one of the logs is being pulled towards the barge. And as it gets to the barge, it never strikes the barge, it just moves around it and then comes back in between where the wake is from the barge that's coming upriver. And he realized, that's the explanation. Space is like a large net. He used the word trampoline. It's like a trampoline. So a trampoline's flat like this. If you don't believe me, go to JK's house. JK and Leith have a trampoline in their backyard. So if you look at it through the window, it's flat like this. You put a body, even a child's body on it, and now it sinks down in the middle where that weight is. And what he realized as he saw this was a thought flash, was that it's the mass of an object that warps space that attracts other smaller objects of less mass to it. That explains why the Earth has a moon that doesn't fly off into space, because you've created this little bowl. So if you try that experiment, if you want to go over to JK's and get a small ball and have someone stand in the middle, if you just roll the ball, it's going to go right towards that person. If you give that ball some speed of rotation, it will spin around that person 3 or 4 times before it actually comes to rest. Well, these planets and our moons are moving constantly, and so they're constantly in orbit. That explained gravity. Gravity is not a force, it's the warping of the actual space, if we want to call it space. This might sound familiar if any of you have ever talked about string theory, and I won't get into that right now, but this is not a physics class. But I found this absolutely fascinating. Where did Einstein come up with this idea? Observing nature. It was time. Our divine parents said, these folks need to understand how this universe works here. And that particular instance happened. He had the thought flash, and he came up with that theory. And by the way, that was 118 years ago. It's never been disproven. Because for years after Newton, we thought gravity was a force. And we even gave it speeds and numbers and everything else, calibrated it. However, it's just basically, we're sitting in a net of matter, and we're a smaller object, and we are attracted to the Earth. Otherwise, we'd fly off into space. But I thought a really good example of this, and not necessarily in thought of the mind, but action of the body, was an experience that our brother Norm, the founder of Sunburst, had. If you read his book, and if you haven't, you need to start. He has a very funny story, the way he wrote it. As a monk at Mount Washington with his guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, he was assigned to a lot of physical construction tasks along with the other brothers. And with his wanderings and connections, he was able to find a 5-ton Mack truck to haul building supplies and haul away trash from Mount Washington. And he talked his guru into buying it. They bought it. And one day he loaded everything up, took one of the brothers, I think it was, it doesn't matter who it was, he took one of the brothers with him, and they started to drive the truck down San Rafael Avenue. Those of you that have been to Mount Washington, anybody here been to Mount Washington? No? Okay. You don't want to walk up Mount Washington, the road to Mount Washington is like this, all right? And they're driving a 5-ton truck down this road. Well, he gets down the road, and the truck starts to pick up speed. He hits the brakes. Nothing happens. He says to his passenger, it was James Butler, he went by the name Bugs. And he said, Bugs, we don't have any brakes. And immediately, Norm's rational mind kicked in, and he started thinking, well, I got to find a good place where we can drive off the cliff so we don't run into somebody's car or run into somebody's house and end up injuring people other than ourselves. So while he's thinking about this, his passenger is freaking out and just wants to get out of the truck. But Norm lets go of the steering wheel. He can't explain why. He lets go of the steering wheel and gets down underneath the steering wheel and starts pumping the brake pedal. He pumped that brake pedal 30 or 40 times, and finally the brakes caught. And he was able to stop the truck just before they went off a cliff, because when they stopped it, he looked up, and there they were, right at the edge of one of the cliffs. His passenger got out of the truck and said, I'm not going the rest of the way down the hill. He ran back to Mount Washington, or hiked back to Mount Washington. But one of the things that Norm said in his book, he said, my unseen companions, my guardian angels, were able to take control of my body and make it do whatever I hadn't thought of doing myself. That's a connection with the divine. He returned to the monastery, and Yogananda had already heard about what happened from his frightened passenger. And he said to Norm, God was with you, wasn't he? And Norm answered, yes, sir, he certainly was. So where did that instant thought, where did that instant action come from? came from the divine. Norm was meditating on a regular basis and for long periods of time. And he had raised his level of consciousness since he'd been at Mount Washington. And he was able to tap in without his physical mind even being aware of what was happening. His divine parents saved his life and the life of James Butler. We in this room all have the same ability that Brother Norm had to access divine thoughts and divine actions. And as we go into meditation for probably 10, 15 minutes, I want you to consider that you are a conduit. And if you open yourself up through meditation and through that work and do it on a regular basis, you definitely will raise your consciousness, but you may come to a point where you can actually close your eyes and access divine thoughts. So, as we sit together, if you've trained in Kriya Yoga, go ahead and use your technique of Kriya Yoga meditation. If you use some other meditation technique, go ahead and use that. If you've never meditated in your life, then simply close your eyes, focus on a point behind your closed eyes about this far away, and look at that theater screen that I just talked about. And then start breathing gently and normally. Breathe in and breathe out. And focus on your breath and focus on that screen. So we're going to let Claudia lead us into our meditation time. Welcome back from meditation. I want to share a few other thoughts. One of the things I was thinking about was that every moment we spend in meditation, we are bringing ourselves closer to our divine parents. We're raising the level of our consciousness. Even if it's only for a few minutes in the morning and a few minutes at night, we're doing things that help us to express our true origins, our true self. We've all had in our lifetime questions about what direction should I go in our occupations, in our relationships, in dealing with our own children. We all have questions. Wouldn't it be nice if we had the ultimate answer whenever we wanted it? I want to share a story with you that happened to me when I first came to Sunburst. When I first began to practice Kriya Yoga meditation, I was gifted some fabulous experiences, and some of those experiences led me to some difficult questions. And I thought, I need to ask somebody some questions. Who can I ask? And I thought of a person, and I drove over to New Frontiers Market in Solvang and talked to the CFO there, who was Valerie. And I said, Valerie, I have some difficult questions, and I'm hoping that you have an answer for me. And so I gave her the questions, and she thought about it for a moment, and then she closed her eyes. When she closed her eyes, I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. But this went on for well over a minute and a half. And I was beginning to think, this is not good. I drove all the way over here to have you answer my questions, and you fell asleep. But then she opened her eyes and gave me the most eloquent, spot-on answers to those questions I could have ever hoped for. And I realized something at that point, that is a gift that I could have, that we could all have, and that is, she was able to close her eyes and in an instant be at her spiritual eye in her consciousness and tap into divine knowledge. That's our gift. That's how we harness the power of the mind. And when she opened her mouth and started to speak, it was almost as if the words weren't coming from her. They were coming from another source. Each of us have that ability. We all have the same light. We breathe in the same light. We breathe out the same light constantly. I think it was Jesus who said, if thy eye be single, thy body shall be full of light. And that light is important. It holds our universe together. It animates every living thing on this planet. Without that light, we would not exist. But it also can bring us all the thoughts and wisdom of our divine parents. They created all this. They know all the science. They know all the ways around everything. We have the ability to tap into that. And that's the true harnessing of the mind, by synchronizing our mind with the minds of our divine parents. I'd like to close with a prayer. And if you'll follow me, I would appreciate that. Divine Father, Divine Mother, we thank you for this gorgeous nature that we sit in at this time. For this beautiful day that we're experiencing. And for the light that you send us. We pray that you will help our motivation, that we double down and meditate at least twice a day. And as we feel the rising of our own consciousness, may we each tap into the source of all knowledge and wisdom. We love you. We thank you, particularly for this life. Amen.
Even now I hear the river of the day, daughter of the sky, singing as she plays. Even now I see the beauty light across the sky, fingers of the sunrise opening my eyes, and my soul is reaching branches up into the sky to feed. My life is but an echo in the temple of eternity. My love is like a great wind that is pressed between the stones. You'll not know where I come from, neither know where I'll be going. Even now I hear the silence, earth around the sun, mother of us all, oh son, a billion brothers one. Even now I hear the singing, angels of the Lord, sailing swiftly through the sky, a mighty ship with oars. And my soul is reaching branches up into the sky to feed. My life is but an echo in the temple of eternity. My love is like a great wind that is pressed between the stones. You'll not know where I come from, neither know where I'll be going. Even now I see the beauty light across the sky, fingers of the sunrise opening my eye. Even now I hear the wisdom from his heart, my home, a billion voices singing, silence from the throne. And my soul is reaching branches up into the sky to feed. My life is but an echo in the temple of eternity. My love is like a great wind that is pressed between the stones.